Hey, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Good to have you here as always. So tonight I'm actually talking about my old hometown, Christchurch, New Zealand, the Garden City. And I'm going to talk to you about how it's been through so much and how it became one of the darkest and the most depressing places that I've ever lived in. And it's a city that has been through decades of skinhead violence, and it also became known as New Zealand's most racist city. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Talk about Christchurch and its dark past and what it was like to grow up there. So Christchurch, the Garden City, considered to be the most Anglican city outside of England. Picture perfect place, beautiful heritage buildings, beautiful Avon River, and you got beaches and estuaries, and it just looks fantastic. That's how it looks, but on the inside, it's a whole different story. The Christchurch that I knew and experienced growing up was a dark, depressing nightmare of a city. What I experienced and what I saw, especially living through the years of the skinhead violence, it was enough for me to want to get out of New Zealand, that's for sure. So growing up in Christchurch, I grew up like many others did. I grew up in a broken family. There was a lot of abuse from siblings and from neighbors and a lot of others. I grew up thinking, this was all normal. When I got into my teen years, I started experiencing Christchurch a bit more. I started hanging out in the square with some of my friends, as we did back then. Us teenage kids would, play hooky from school and go hang out at the doghouse, go hang out in the square. I noticed that a lot of my friends had similar issues to me. We all felt the same way. We all felt depressed, but we never really talked about it because we didn't understand what was going on. And then I noticed more and more people in the city had that same depression. A lot of people expressed it through their anger. And of course, like many other teens, I would hang out with my mates on a Friday night in the square, and it'd be an amalgamation of street performers, preachers, the wizard, skinheads, punks, metalers, homies, mongrel mob, black power, and everyone else in between. And a lot of us were there for the show. Generally there would be fights, there would be some kind of violence. Now, this was kind of normal back in those days, it was never anything too major. But then the violence started getting worse, and the skinheads were causing a lot of it. Their fights were becoming more frequent, and they were more random with who they were targeting. And a lot of us got involved in it in one way or another. If you're a white kid and you're into metal or punk, you probably end up being associated with skinheads, as I was and many others were at the time. But that overwhelming feeling of depression was really settling on the city, because people were afraid to go out, especially into town on a Friday night, because you'd either get bashed by the skinheads for just being there or being with someone who wasn't white, or you weren't white yourself. But if you were white and you had short hair, because like me, you couldn't grow long hair, you would get targeted as a skinhead, and you would get attacked, normally by large groups of Pacific Islanders or Māori kids. That was how it was for many in the city at that time, and I'm talking all through the late 80s, early 90s, and the violence was getting worse and worse and worse. These incidents of violence were increasing, that's for sure.
On the sequel to Romper Stomper, as we're sitting in the city of Melbourne.
A few moments later.
It's gonna go, it's gonna go, it's gonna fucking go! Oh, here we go. Choice! Yeah, that's a fucking bullet!
And then there were the murders. And that really started scaring everyone. Eventually, I started tattooing, which definitely helped me, and it helped me to get away from all these movements and the enticement of being in these movements, you know, going out. Because that's the thing, a lot of the time you would go out, you'd run into these groups, and you'd either have to join them or fight them. Now, a lot of us didn't want to join them. We also didn't want to fight them, you know, but that was really, really difficult for many of us. I got away because of tattooing. That was fantastic. Then I also started tattooing quite a few of the skinheads as well. Couldn't quite get away from it. And that was actually adding to my depression. I thought, I don't want to be stuck in this place. I don't want to be stuck here, you know, and what are the opportunities for me? You know, I can become a skinhead, or I can get beaten up by a bunch of Maori or Pacific Islanders because they think I'm a skinhead. And as far as tattooing goes, yeah, I was doing really well. You know, I started building a reputation for myself. And that was even harder because New Zealand especially has a massive problem with tall poppy syndrome. Anytime anyone starts to do well for themselves, they're going to cut you down. They cut people down because they are jealous. They want to do well for themselves, but they don't know how. They live in a city or in a country where the opportunities just aren't there, not for everyone. You know, when you come from poverty and when you come from a place that's really depressing, it's hard to see past anything and seeing a way of getting out. And it was for me, but I knew I had to get out. I knew I had to leave. So travel for me, first time I ever went into a travel agency, I knew that was I was about 14 when I did. I knew I was going to travel and get out. And I wasn't aware that I was so depressed at that time. I guess, you know, you're not a lot of the time, you know, unless you're aware of what depression actually is. You don't know that you have it. And it wasn't until I moved away, moved overseas, moved to a warmer climate, you know, in a country where everyone was more uplifting and there wasn't a lot of the racism or violence. Australia, for me, in that first year was phenomenal. You know, it really changed my life. I traveled for another 17 years after that. And when I went back to do some healing, because if there's one thing that comes out of a lot of bad times, is the ability to heal. That's the one thing that I've always loved about Christchurch. It's a place of healing. When a city has been through so much and when it's seen so much, when it's lost so many, people heal. I went back to Christchurch to do a lot of healing and I am grateful for it. And a lot of people have done over the last 20 years, especially with things like the earthquake and the Christchurch terror attack. Christchurch has been through a lot and it's challenging and I get it. And that is where a lot of the depression comes from. It's a hard place to live. Christchurch had one of the highest teenage suicide rates in New Zealand, and New Zealand has some of the highest suicide rates in the world. And it's because you feel alone. You feel so isolated. There's a lot of despair for many. That has also helped them to get on the path of healing, as it has for me. Now, the last time I was in New Zealand, I was there during COVID. I was there for 5 years, and I again did a lot more healing, but I also again became aware of my depression. And a lot of it was related to things like the cost of living and the weather. Now, Christchurch itself hasn't had much of a population growth over the last 30 years. It goes up and down all the time. Obviously, when major catastrophic events like the earthquake happen, I think about 50,000 people actually moved away from Christchurch. I did the same. As soon as I could get out of New Zealand last year, I got out. Things had gotten really bad. The economy, of course, has tanked. That has just made Christchurch an even harder place to live. Christchurch will always be a beautiful city on the outset. It has a lot to offer. And the way they're rebuilding the city, albeit slowly, it is actually becoming an amazing looking city. There's a lot to offer. And only the future will tell. But it is a city of love. Of course, you know, through so much adversity comes love. And I certainly found that the people of Christchurch are very loving, very caring, and they're very, very strong people. So there you go. It's a look back into my old hometown and, you know, everything it's been through. And if you ever get the opportunity, definitely go visit Christchurch. It is a beautiful city to visit and the people are very, very friendly. Thanks so much for tuning in for this video about my old hometown. If you like what you saw and if you want to see more videos like this, many different ways to support me and support the channel. You can buy me coffees, of course. You can buy my merchandise, which would be much appreciated. Or there's super likes, membership, all the good stuff on this channel. All the links are in the description below. But as always, if you give this video a big like, subscribe down below and hit that little bell to get notified, and make sure you hit all notifications. You'll be seeing new videos from me every week. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe. Peace out. Love and light to you. And aroha nui te o tatahi.